Newsfirst, Newsline.
Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to another edition of Newsline. We're coming to you live from the Newsfirst studios. However, our guest, due to the current situation in the country, will be joining us virtually. A very, very important week for all Sri Lankans. A very confusing week also for all Sri Lankans because a new president is to be appointed within a matter of days. But this is a different experience for many Sri Lankans because we're usually used to vote for a president at a presidential election. But for some people, including myself, this would be the first time that we see a parliament electing a president, an interim president, because the previous president has resigned. There was only one instance of a similar situation that happened in the past, and that was with President Bandaranaike. But for many people, especially the youth, this is the first time that they are not themselves going to the polling booth and electing the head of the executive. And this couldn't have come at a worse time because we are facing an economic crisis. To discuss these legal matters and much more, we've got a person from the legal fraternity, of course, and also with his hand in a bit of politics. Attorney at law, Harshana Nanayakkara, member of the Executive Council of the National People's Power Movement. Very good evening, Mr. Nanayakkara, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Shalan. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Nanayakkara, just to clear the water regarding the election of the new interim president. Now, there are four names that have been fielded, namely for acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Then we have opposition leader Sajith Premadasa. Then we have parliamentarian from the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumuna Dalla Salha Peruma, and also the leader of the NPP, Andrakumara Dissanayake. So speaking about these candidates, there is this opinion that is being formulated on social media saying that acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe cannot stand for this election because by virtue of his appointment to the position of acting president, he has relinquished his position in parliament. Therefore, he is no longer a parliamentarian. But what is really the legal background to this? Because people seem to believe in some of these, but best to ask an expert in the legal field.
Thank you, Shalan. First, in your question, you said they're trying to appoint an interim president, right? Now, when you say interim president, I think that's a wrong saying because the president who will be elected by the parliament will serve for the rest of remainder of the term. So he's not legally an interim president. He is a president. But however, if so wish, he can have an interim government. But that's something I'll explain later. So basically, yes, you are right, because I saw on social media two schools of thought. One of them thought that when Ranil Wickremesinghe got appointed as PM, he loses his MP portfolio. So therefore, he is not eligible to stand in for the presidential race inside the parliament. But then I belong to the other side of the school where I feel when you look at section 40 and 32, read disjunctively, he does not lose his MPship, so therefore he could contest. Now, if you remember, when Premadasa was assassinated, D.V. Wijetunga, member of parliament, became the acting president. And thereafter, he became the president as well. It was not challenged at that time. But these two different schools of thought. So I think no matter whatever the lawyers say, it is ultimately it's a constitutional matter. Only the Supreme Court's determined. So therefore, unless and until you go to the Supreme Court with regard to this matter, you will not know which school of thought is the correct one. But I am of the view that Ranil Wickremesinghe, by being acting president, is not disqualified according to the Constitution to run for the presidency. That's what I think.
Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's speak about the candidates who have been fielded or who have put their names in for this presidential race. Let's start off with the candidate from your party, Andrakumara Dissanayake. Now, your candidate or the leader of your party was vociferous in Parliament when he said that Ranil Wickremesinghe does not have the mandate to hold the position of Prime Minister previously, and also he doesn't have the mandate to hold the position of the interim president. But the leader of the NPP also has only 3 seats in Parliament. So What makes it different this time? What makes your leader be of the stance that he has the mandate to be the interim president of Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I will answer that question. I hope, Sharon, I'll get about 1.5 minutes to explain the background, because this is the most crucial question which I can explain the entire position. First and foremost, we must understand neither Anirudh Dissanayake, neither Ranil, neither Sajid or Dallas have the mandate of the people to be the president of this country. For that matter, this parliament does not even have a mandate. They used to have a mandate when Gotabaya Rajapaksa was president, 6.9 million voted, and that is reflected in the parliament. But that mandate, that consent changed drastically, and today this parliament does not reflect the will of the people at a ground level. It has changed drastically. So therefore, in order to bring stability, you need a government that one can trust, and they only trust when they appoint someone. Okay? Now what's happening here? Firstly, going back to the point, what the position of our party was, that we should, the best option is to ask for a fresh election, a fresh mandate. But we fully understand that current circumstances does not allow that. So therefore, our first proposal was appoint the speaker as the president constitutionally, and then with a multi-party cabinet, have a limited period, maybe 3 months or 6 months, with a specific program to address the urgent issues such as fuel, gas, school issues, transport issues, and things like that. Because you can't hold an election like this, not in these circumstances. So when you go for interim period, and in fact, we even suggested, because the ground level has changed so much, that whatever the specific program must be monitored by civil organizations, including the protesters at Golface and other organizations. All collective effort without promoting any political project, because the country is in dire straits at the moment. So therefore, having political projects is not going to help. It has to be stabilized in the country within 3 or 6 months. Thereafter, go for a fresh mandate. Because only when there's a fresh mandate, people will have the patience, right, with that government and give them a kind of a grace period, maybe 6 months or 1 year to perform. Even Gotabaya had that grace period. But whatever the head changing you do inside this parliament is not going to win the trust of the people. They just don't trust this place anymore. And therefore, country will destabilize unless you go for interim government. Now, coming back to Ranil, what an unfortunate situation this country. Ranil Wickremesinghe actually came into the parliament as a prime minister, as the body armor for the Rajapaksa family. You know, the Rajapaksas did not resign. They were chased away, although he gave the resignation letter. Mahinda Rajapaksa chased away. They went into hiding in sea and bunkers. So let that be history. So what we have is a situation, 6.9 million people voted Gotabaya in. At the same time, they voted Ranil Wickremesinghe also out. And he's a man who could not secure his seat from Colombo. He was rejected outright. Now, using that same 6.9 million voter base, and Ranil trying to become the president with the help of the Pohottuwe MPs inside the parliament, this is a mockery of democracy in the highest forum, in the highest norm. Because right now, who's supporting him? The Pohottuwe MPs. So people are saying Ranil also must go home. Why? Because Ranil is not a separate entity. He came as the protector of the Rajapaksas. So we would have got rid of the Rajapaksa names and the faces, but in spirit, everything is being now handled by Basil Rajapaksa and the Rajapaksa clan. Because when Ranil comes into power, they know they are safe. None of the cases will be investigated. Whatever their ill-gotten gains will be safe. So therefore, there's a natural cry from ground level, not just our party, saying Ranil also must go. Because Ranil was part of the Rajapaksa regime. So therefore, if Ranil Wickremesinghe for some reason is elected as president, interim or otherwise, there'll be serious crisis in this country. Destabilizing will continue at a rapid speed. That's my thought on it.
Mr. Nanayakkara, there are those who say that Sri Lanka, this is not the point for Sri Lanka to elect the best president. The only chance that Sri Lankans get to elect the best president is at an election where the people can directly go and vote for their president. And we've done that a couple of times. We failed miserably at it. But there are people who say that this is not the time to see who is the best interim president. this is the time to see who can bring some sort of stability. And there are those who see Prime Minister or Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe as a potential candidate, saying that he can bring stability, given the fact that, of course, now he has made certain promises to bring back fuel into the country, to solve the gas crisis, also that discussions on the IMF deal is also ongoing. Furthermore, today, releasing a special statement, Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe also promised that he will inquire into if the police department in the United Kingdom can assist Sri Lanka on conducting the investigations into the Easter Sunday attacks. So there are people who believe that something is being done right now, so maybe he is a good candidate for the interim presidency. Your response to these people?
Well, basically what I'm trying to say is, you're right. We are not looking for the best interim president. In fact, what we are looking at is a caretaker government till the will of the people are exercised at an election, right? And Ranil Wickremesinghe has given many promises before. People remember he has been Prime Minister 5 times before. He was positioned in power. Now he's saying that he will get the help from England to get the investigation of the East attack, which is very good. But first he can start, because by releasing some of the volumes of the Commission of Inquiry of the East attack, about 5 or 6 volumes were never released to the public. Okay, so if he's very sincere about investigations, that was not even given to the Attorney General. So there are 5 or 7 volumes of the Commission of Inquiry to the East attacks, which is not in the public eye. So if he's sincere, without waiting for England to come, he can start by releasing that. And if anybody wants to believe Ranil, let it be so. What I'm trying to say is, when people said Gota go home or Ranil go home, it is not simply that they go home. What the people wanted was the corrupt political culture to come to an end. Inside that slogan, the corrupt political culture, where politicians are above the law, they don't get punished, they get preferences. What people are tired of in this country is a corrupt political regime. And this parliament, and definitely Ranil, is a reflection of that corrupt political culture. He has been Prime Minister before. So therefore, there are Ranil fans who wish he would deliver. I mean, so would I. But believe me, even from Ranil, I'm not expecting miracles. What we need is stabilization. Stabilization. That's what we said. I mean, initially, what we said was, we will have a multi-party cabinet. We'll have a non-political or a person without a political privilege. So even if tomorrow they can appoint a non-political project or a non-political person who does not have a future election agenda, under the Sanak has even said, we are willing to even withdraw. What we wanted was consensus. Because without consensus, you can't keep on arguing and fighting. There's no time for it. We wanted the entire cabinet to consensually appoint a Prime Minister, agreement of the parties. Now we don't have agreement. What we have is a competition, right? Now, this is not suitable for this time. This is not suitable at all. So therefore, people may have hope and prayers, but I'll tell you one thing. I have stopped dreaming and hoping. Facts are very different. Ground level reality is very different. So therefore, Ranil, I believe, is a serial failure, and this time also he will fail. But this time, this entire government will fall on the heads of the people, his mistakes. So therefore, I don't think I would politically want to trust him at all.
Mr. Nanayakkara, of course, the Parliament has been asking the people to unite. They've been asking the people to join hands to bring this country out of the crisis that we're in, the crisis that certain people put us in. But from the beginning of the year, one thing that they have forgotten is that the people have already come together. The people came together. The people, for the first time in the history of Sri Lanka, held political leaders accountable for their decisions. The people didn't do that while they were divided. The people didn't do that while they were divided on communal lines, on basis of religion, on the basis of race. They didn't do that like that. They did that together. The people have united. But what's really, really sad to see is the fact that Parliament still has not united, and it's there for the whole world to see. And besides it being sad for all Sri Lankans, it is also a crying shame on the entire country. We'll continue to discuss these matters after this short commercial break. There have been new regulations, or new regulations are expected under the state of emergency that has been announced by the acting president. But the Bar Association believes otherwise. The Bar Association believes that there is no need to impose a state of emergency. What really is this state of emergency, and why has it become such a habit? It's almost like a cane used by a teacher to discipline their students. We'll continue this discussion after this short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Newsline live.
News First, Newsline. Full-scale impartial review on Easter attacks. State of emergency imposed. SLPP engages in emergency discussions. What is the next step of the Aragalaya? Hospitals closed due to the fuel shortage. News First, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline live. The state of emergency. Sri Lanka is under a state of emergency right now by a proclamation issued by the acting president, Ranil Wickremesinghe. Under the state of emergency, of course, regulations can be brought forth even to curb fundamental rights. This includes the right for people to move about, the right for people to gather, the right for people to protest. Maternity law, Harshana Nanayakkara, the Bar Association has issued a statement saying that requesting the acting president to revoke this state of emergency. I know we've been in and out of state of emergency for quite some time now. During the war, we were under a state of emergency for about 30 years in a row. But the state of emergency really hasn't affected our lives as much as it is affecting us now. So a little bit of an introduction about this state of emergency and under which circumstances can it be brought? What really is the reason for a state of emergency to be proclaimed right now?
Now, firstly, I must tell you that this is exactly the problem. The problem is a country cannot be governed by laws or the constitutional provisions alone. One important thing is the consent or the mandate of the people. Now, if laws and constitutions can govern a country successfully, Gotabaya Rajapaksa would have been the most successful president. I mean, he had 20th Amendment to help him. He had all the laws and the constitution backing him. But he still had to go. Right now, this declaration of emergency is completely baseless because there's no emergency in the country. Full stop. This is why the Bar Association even issued a letter, a statement saying, revoke this state of emergency. Because when you impose the state of emergency, you can activate provisions of the Prevention of Terrorism Act and various other regulations. And emergency regulations can bypass all the laws except for the Constitution. All the laws except for the Constitution. And we know how in the past, this state of emergency has been abused by arresting opponents. And Ranil Wickremesinghe, I saw, had said that those who are putting pressure on MPs for the election, right, should be investigated, and the CID is investigating. The man got everything wrong because it is the duty of the citizen to pressurize the agent or the representative they send into the parliament. But not violence, peaceful, democratic right. So freedom of expression, telling your MP, don't vote for rogues in the parliament to become the president, is that democratic right? Freedom of speech. So this state of emergency has been brought in by Ranil simply because even before he becomes president, he sees he has no mandate, no consent of the public. So he is trying to bring in the army to the ground, oppress people, and scuttle their freedom of speech and association and politics. So this is the worst thing that a presidential aspirant should do, right? So he's doing that simply because there'll be many protest marches, there'll be many protests, freedoms to speak. He wants all that to stop. That's why even he's calling some of the strugglers, I mean, all the ones who are in the Aragalaya, as fascist. I mean, how can you call them fascist? If there's someone who's pressurizing MPs unlawfully, it is by offering bribes. We heard Maitripala saying that they're spending 10 million, 20 million, purchasing MPs to vote for a particular side. And we heard today Peratugami Educational Secretary Pubudu Jagara saying 104 people have been paid money by Basil Rajapaksa. I don't know the truth of it. But now that pressurizing is unlawfully illegal. And if Ranil is involved, he should be looking into that, not the freedom of speech of the people. So my point is, this emergency laws that came about, which the Bar Association rejects, is simply to stifle the freedom of speech for his political agenda and political project. It is not to help the country in any way. And this shows who the fascist really is. That will be Ranil Wickremesinghe, a man who's trying to run a country without the mandate of the people.
Mr. Nanayakkara, you were speaking about bribes being offered to parliamentarians. You said you are not too familiar with the authenticity of the information that was put out by certain political actors. But one thing that's there for sure is the statement of the Prime Minister that was reported on the media, that the Prime Minister has promised SLPP MPs to rebuild their houses. Is this, or can this be dubbed as a form of a bribe?
That can amount to a bribe. That can amount to a bribe, but must be investigated. But the other two people said they must be having information. One was Pubudu Jagara, the other one was Maithripala. So bottom line is, the man who's bribing, who's pressurizing unlawfully the MPs are them, is Ranil Wickremesinghe. So even right now, he is getting the backup of the Pohoku. I mean, look at the organizers he has appointed. Johnsons and everybody. So, I mean, he's trying to carry out a rejected political culture, which I don't think people will tolerate. And this is why exactly Shalana said, instability will increase when Ranil comes in, because he has no mandate and he's a Rajapaksa defender.
Mr. Nanayakkara, during the recent days, especially after former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa left the country and he submitted his letter of resignation, there have been certain protests that were taking place in the country, but there were also some concerning press releases that were coming out from various responsible authorities saying that if protesters get violent, they will have to suffer the consequences. Now, this can be interpreted in multiple ways. So far, despite what has happened in the country, I believe, despite a few isolated incidents involving the military, the police, and clashes with the people, despite some ugly scenes there, this has been relatively quite better compared to the past experiences that we've had in Sri Lanka. We remember when there were extensive clashes, civil unrest between especially the military and the general public. Do you see maybe some escalation during the next few days if this instability does prevail?
It depends. First and foremost, I am very happy to say that the Gulf struggle gave a lesson to the world. You can chase away a dictator by simply singing songs and protesting and being determined. That's why we call it a struggle of love. Not a single bullet was fired. Okay, not a single person was attacked, right? And so therefore, that's a lesson to be learned for the entire world, because I have not seen something like this anywhere before, of course, subject to correction. Secondly, there were some, firstly, I mean, most importantly, this freedom of speech and freedom of association cannot be a criminal activity. If you are going to break public property or attack someone or threaten someone with death, those are criminal offenses and the authorities must arrest them. Even among the struggling crowd or the Aragala crowd, as you put it, right? If they are breaking the law, that's the end of the matter. They can't hide behind the constitution and freedom of speech and break the law. This is why NPP, our party, from the word go, made a press release and said, do not, if you feel like throwing a rock at someone, do not come to the protest. Because you cannot break the law and expect to be protected. This is why Bar Association, all the lawyers, as you know, that we appeared for free for those protesters. But we stayed away from appearing for those who broke the law. But again, if you remember, the violent incidents started coming after Ranil became acting president. After Gotabaya, you put a very nice word, Gotabaya left, I would believe he was chased away and he ran away for his dear life. But you're being kind to him. It's okay. It's all right. Right? So therefore, after he was chased away, for the first time, journalists are getting assaulted when they were showing their ID card in front of the Prime Minister's office. Now, burning of the Prime Minister's house, terrible, wrong, please arrest them. Please arrest them. We are not saying no to it. But they haven't even found anyone yet. Then suddenly 2 T-56 are being stolen by protesters who did not even carry a rock with them from the army. So these stories are now being made up by Ranil Wickremesinghe's regime simply because he knows he doesn't have the mandate or the consent. So let's create a story. He did the same thing in 88-89. Create a story, make the protesters look bad and criminals, and start oppressing them. This is what he did in 88-89. But however, one thing for sure, we have smartphones, videos, and Facebook now. In 88-89, we didn't have it. So Ranil's agenda is very clear. He will use all force necessary. He will be the most undemocratic president we'll ever have, despite the nice English-speaking, coat-wearing, tie-wearing, posh schools, whatever. He'll be a terrible president, and the country will be at an end. But remember that, what's going to happen? What is the reason why none of these protesters took even a rock? They were allowed to protest. Despite all skirmishes, they were allowed to protest. And if you suppress protest, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is people will resort to violence. It is inevitable. And we will not be able to control the crowds if they get arrested for freedom of speech, talking, putting a post on the Facebook. So whether the crowds who are all this time being peaceful, whether they'll be violent or not, also in the hands of Ranil Wickremesinghe. But knowing him, since he has no mandate or consent, he will use the army and oppression tactics. For that, people will retaliate. And how they would retaliate, I would not know. I'm just hoping and praying for the sake of the country that there won't be a bloodbath or violence. I mean, no citizen wants that.
But Mr. Harshana Nanayakkara, now one thing that is for sure is that if there is going to be a consensual government in Parliament or an interim government, interim all-party government, the support of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is necessary. So do you believe that the events that took place in Sri Lanka up to date is enough to convince politicians appointed by the people under the ticket of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna to detach themselves from the Rajapaksa regime or the corrupt regime, as the people call it, and come over to the other side to establish a consensual all-party government to ensure stability in the country?
Well, actually, as you know, that Anuruddha Dissanayake was the last to give in nominations. The reason was, for about good 2 to 3 days, we spoke with all political parties and told them, let's not have a competition, let's go for a consensual government, because the country needs stability. While all those political parties and their leaders and representatives agreed with us conceptually, they said, yes, this is the best thing to do, but they have their power projects in play. Ranil has to come into power to protect. Remember, at least 200 people of this parliament, at least 200 MPs in this parliament will never be able to face election again. People have changed. So their political dreams and careers are going to end. So most of the Podujana Peramuna fellows would like to keep their MP post and get the perks for the next 2 years also, because they will not be able to face the public again. Definitely not win an election. So for them, they are not according to their conscience. They are just acting according to their personal gain, financial and otherwise, because they know they will not be able to contest. And they also know they will not be safe if Anuruddha Dissanayake becomes president. But with Ranil, they are safe because that's his job. Ranil's job is to protect the roguish elements there. So despite the people are coming together with a conscience to save the country, at least 200 of these MPs, if not, I wouldn't say 225, because there are still some good people inside the parliament, even in other parties, but very small number. This is why I'm telling you, Shalan, that Pohoto will never support, right? Their agenda is different. The politicians, at least 200 people in this side-pass parliament, doesn't care about what the people think or what they go through. They have their own personal agendas. This is why I'm saying this parliament does not reflect the will of the people. And again, having said that, I must say, and none of these MPs came into the parliament by breaking the gates of the parliament. People voted them in. But I'm hoping and praying now they have changed. So do not expect anything decent or civilized or any decision in common good, not in this parliament. You won't get it. Simple as that. So people should not have false hopes about this parliament and their delivery.
Definitely, Mr. Nanayakkara, but we do have, or the people do have hope for this country, and there will be an election coming next. And there is this age-old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It's an apt saying for people to remember when they vote at the next election. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Harshana Nanayakkara, Executive Committee Member of the National People's Power Movement, for joining us tonight. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in, and do stay tuned to Newsline, as we will continue to keep you up to date on the latest political unfoldings during these very turbulent times. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself and God bless.